Welcome, everyone, to the Leadership in Quarters podcast, the interview series where leaders come to share their perspectives on different leadership topics. I'm Josh Seldin, and today's guest is Karen Ansen. Karen Ansen is the principal lawyer and consultant at Ignite HR and Employment Law, where she partners with organizations to build fair, people-first workplaces grounded in trust, respect, and accountability. With a compassionate yet pragmatic approach, Karen combines deep legal expertise with a passion for human connection, helping leaders navigate complex employment matters with confidence and clarity. She's committed to fostering high-trust cultures where transparency, authentic leadership, and open feedback drive engagement and growth. Karen believes that when people feel heard, valued, and supported, workplaces and the people within them thrive. So welcome, Karen.
Oh, thank you. That's amazing. When you have to write a bio about yourself, you always think, oh, how's this going to work? But it's been a journey to get to that point, because as a lawyer, it's probably not the number one thing that people lead with in terms of the way that they run their organizations and the way they help their clients. So it's been a journey to get to here, to understand what organizations need and what leaders need to support them to be good leaders.
I tell you, the intro really says a lot about you and everything that you stand for. And one thing I love about it is the topic of trust and high trust cultures that you really embody there. If you're okay with that, we'll jump in and start talking about trust.
That sounds amazing.
Perfect. I love it. So, starting with that, can you explain to everybody what a high trust culture is and what the benefits of the organization are that have a high trust culture?
So the only way that you can have a high trust culture is with transparency, consistency, and also with leaders that are being authentic to themselves, but also that understand that communication is the key. A high trust culture, what it basically breeds is the ability for people to be able to operate in their highest level of who they are as human beings, not feeling as if there's any kind of, your head's going to be on the chopping block at any moment. There's a trust that you'll be able to be open with people, that you're able to bring your authentic version of yourself to work. And if you are having a bad day, you don't have to hide who you are.
Right.
But respect other people's boundaries as well, and understand that it's not always about the individual, it's about the team, and it's about the relationships and the communication and all of that.
You keep mentioning the word authentic or authenticity. How does authenticity in a leader translate to building trust and having trust within their culture?
So what I found, and this is my journey as well, is that when you first begin to be a leader, you have this idea, you've probably had a few leaders that were possibly problematic in your life,
Right.
and you go, maybe I don't want to be like them. I've had a few that embodied what I thought were amazing and helpful and open and supportive and all of those things. And I think when I first started, a lot of people, I know my husband he's run small businesses and large businesses all his life. He has the complete opposite way of dealing with things. He's in manufacturing and automotive. So it's a very different thing to professional services. So it's just do what you're told. There's very little scope for anything outside the box. Things need to be done on time, and there's no kind of negotiating. But he's run very successful businesses, and he's always had good staff, or good loyal staff, which whenever I say to him, have you tried this? Have you tried that? He always says to me, Kaz, I've got this. But so when I first started, it was interesting because my profile, my disc profile, has moved from being in the I was an SI. I don't know if you understand what disc profiles are.
Yeah, I'm actually an IS also.
So what it was that I was trying to be everyone's friend. And the thing is, the problem is with that and trying to understand everybody and understand and be impactful in their lives. The problem with that is that you then become almost someone's friend rather than their leader. And that's not what people are looking for. Yes, they're looking for being heard and understood, but they're looking for someone to lead and be the embodiment of what that leader means. And so to find that authentic version of a leader, what you need to do is you have a few mishaps on the way and you realize, okay, that didn't work. You start to look at your personality, the things that drive you. And I started to look at some of the things that I didn't understand about myself, the way I was reacting to things. And so when it's subconscious, The problem is that you don't know why you're reacting to patterns. So when you bring it into your conscious mind and say, okay, I start to unpack why I reacted that way or why I did this, and then you're conscious of the things that are actually harming your process or are not being the best version of you. And you're able to then, what I started to do is have conversations with people about saying, look, actually, this is making me uncomfortable. And it made it an authentic conversation about how I was feeling about the interactions, for example, or when people didn't meet deadlines. What a lot of leaders do is because they get to a point where they are so good at their job, they're promoted. The problem is that they can do the job of the people working for them without thinking about it. And they often do. So when someone's not performing in their job, they say, look, it's okay. I've got this. You go and do something else. We'll finish that for you. The problem is that's not helping them either. And so you get resentful, your boundaries are crossed. And so you have to find a way to be, it's about being inquisitive. So what a lot of people do is make assumptions about the way people are and why they're not delivering on something. And they make excuses and then they go over in their head and say, okay, I'm just going to fix this. I'm not going to have this argument with this person. But it doesn't have to be an argument. It can be healthy conflict, but it doesn't have to be an argument.
Right.
So, what I mean when I say authentic is bringing all of those things together, understanding self, understanding others, understanding how communication works, and being able to be inquisitive and curious and ask questions, don't make assumptions, because your head will tell you all the time, because it's always looking for danger all the time. Your brain is always looking for danger. So, you are able to quieten that and say, look, no, I've actually got a process. I know that this is the best way forward, and then execute rather than go into that fear, avoidance, don't deal with it. And then the relationships start to break down really badly because there's that resentment built up from both people because this person didn't hear what they needed to hear. You didn't say what you needed to say. And you didn't say it in a way that is in alignment with who you are. And if you are a direct person, there's nothing wrong with that. Some of the best leaders that I've ever had, who I absolutely love, and my profile has now changed because of my job. I sit now between I and D.
Gotcha.
So it's moved that far up. And so I have to be that person in someone's organization because if you don't have somebody who's able to say the things that people haven't been able to say or do the
Mhm.
things and direct people and say, listen, we've got a deadline on this. What do we need to get there? What does that look like? And that's what they're looking for when they hire me. They want that person to be able to lead them to where they need to go, if that all makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And it got me thinking, how do you see leaders kind of walk that line between, it's a friendship and wanting to help? Because everybody always has good intentions. Everybody wants
Yeah.
to help, if people are having issues or missing deadlines, but also not overstepping and creating that resentment and deteriorating the trust because now the message may be, even though you wanted to help, I don't trust you to get the work done, so now I'm going to do it for you. How do you handle that situation?
So there's a real human element to this. Okay. So the problem is that people want to be seen and heard. Okay. They want to be
Mhm.
understood. But that doesn't mean that you have to have them over for dinner on Saturday night. Of course, you're going to make friends at work. But what I'm saying is that there's an element of a leader that needs to understand how the person works and understand what makes them tick and what's important to them. So those conversations are really important when you have your 360s or your performance reviews. What a lot of people do is they go into that fear-based space because they know that there's messages that they've got to get around, is knowing that person and understanding that person and having them see you as well, knowing enough about you
Mhm.
and being able to be vulnerable at times and show sometimes, look, I haven't got my shit together all the time. I don't have it all together all the time. And it's that very fine line being able to walk that. And I always say to people, the reason that you're having problems with this performance management issue is because there's not enough in the bucket. And they said, what does that mean? What it means is that if you've got enough in your bucket in terms of the performance management piece, there's enough of the positive stuff, there's enough of the constructive stuff, there's enough of the personal stuff in there. You can take a bit out
Hmm.
You can take a little bit out to go, okay, we've got an issue here we need to deal with. And I want to check my understanding of what's going on. And it's quite funny because I do a lot of performance management on behalf of my clients because they just don't have the expertise sometimes, but they also are very worried that there's going to be a legal implication,
Uh,
okay, because of bullying, and there's a lot of mental health issues in the workplace that they don't really know how to navigate. And so they employ someone like me who has a legal background that's able to write the letters in a way that is very clear and very succinct and has all of the information in it that it needs legally to get someone across the line. But then to actually manage the meeting, and it's quite funny. I had a meeting on Friday, actually, it was quite interesting. And it seems simple. It's an aged care facility, and the staff member was found to be stealing food
wow.
from the residents, like in front of the residents, just dishing a dish up and
Oh my
walks out.
gosh.
I know. Anyway, the CEO's had enough because it's not just that. They're putting it in the fridge to take it home to their families. They're putting chuck steak and whatever in the in the bin outside to take home. There's a whole host of things going on, and he's had enough. Anyway, this girl was sitting in the meeting and she was angry. She was angry. And I was on Zoom
Hmm.
and my CEO was there and also the care manager was there. And she was giving it to him. And I just sat quietly for a minute and I said, do you know, if someone had caught me on the CCTV openly stealing food, having a break when I'm not supposed to, and I'm supposed to be helping
Right.
people in an aged care, I would be horrified, devastated. And this is what I said to her. I would be just, oh my God, I am so sorry. It was a
Right.
moment. I was hungry. And because I said to her, is this something that happens all the time? And she said, yes, it is. We're all doing it.
Wow.
And it was like, okay. But I just said, look, if you wanted to come here and resolve the issue and be respectful and have a then why not come with that? Why come with
Right.
this defensive? And a lot of the time, it comes from fear.
Hmm.
They're scared, so that they're very defensive. Some people don't know how to let that guard down. So when people are dealing with that, I'm always really curious about it. And so I always ask, why this defense? Oh, I'm just a direct person. I said, oh, I think it's crossed past direct. I
Yeah.
think there's a real issue around this for me. And I have to make a decision about whether or not we can move forward and resolve it, or whether I make recommend that you be moved on to somewhere else.
Right.
And it was one of those moments where I thought a lot of employers who don't have the thousands and thousands of meetings that I've done would be absolutely outraged. It would be escalation, and there would be a big blow up, and then there'd probably be a legal outcome.
Right.
But what I did was just be curious and ask a question. And then she had self reflection. And I know she would have been thinking about it over the
Hmm.
weekend and whether or not she can move forward with it. And I said to her, I want to know whether you can actually move forward with this and come with the right attitude to say, listen, I do want to work with this because otherwise I don't think I can work with this. I don't think anyone can work with this. How can we get it back on track is the problem.
Yeah.
Anyway, but that takes a lot of confidence dealing with these matters because people get so outraged by other people's behavior that it just escalates into this whole thing. And I know for a lawyer that sounds really weird and that I should probably, because I've had other colleagues of mine say, oh, but that's how we make our money. And I laugh and I always say, I'm fine. I don't need to be in court every 5 minutes.
Right. Oh.
But yeah, so yeah, there you go.
I love what you said because I think, and going back to what you said originally, we as leaders make a lot of assumptions. And just like you said, you could have gone into that situation and made a bunch of assumptions about the person and just left it there. And then, like your
Yep.
coworkers, fine, do that. Let's go to
Mhm.
court, whatever.
Yep.
But in a trust building culture, I think you touched on two things that are so important is approaching situations with curiosity and not assuming you already know the answer as you get into the situation and asking real questions, not I'd say leading questions where I'm going to ask you things and make it seem like I'm curious, but I know where I think you're going to go and I'm going to lead you there.
The other person knows that
Yeah,
when you're
exactly.
leading them down the path. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's part of their authenticity. They know you're not being authentic and they know you're leading them and
Yeah.
vulnerability. And I don't know why. I feel like it's this new thing where leaders don't like to be vulnerable and don't like to show their vulnerability and their true selves.
Mm.
But that's like the best way to gain the trust of the other
So
person. And if
why?
you're asking them to do it, I don't know why we can't as well.
So why do you think? I know why I think, but why do you think that's the case? Why do you think that people don't want to be vulnerable?
My opinion
Yeah.
is that a lot of
Yeah.
the leaders today have a rather large ego. And I think vulnerability shows that they are not as strong as they come across, especially if they're more in the very blunt, very straightforward, and beyond type of mindset that they know everything that they're speaking about. They're the ones giving the direction, and anything that they view as weakness, which I think they view vulnerability as a weakness,
Absolutely.
will have people start questioning their authority.
Yeah. All it takes is something to go wrong for that person to realize that, and I've seen it time and time again. I work with a lot of boards and I've had to walk CEOs with probably the biggest egos you've ever seen. And for them to admit or for them to be performance managed and moved out, I'm not saying it happens all the time, but most of the time, I'm able to navigate that process and have the conversation with them. How do you think we got here? How do you think we got here? Why are we here? So, performance is not always about the numbers, it's not always about the metrics. And people really undervalue the importance of people skills. And you know what they measure people on now? Emotional intelligence. That's the one thing they measure people on now. If any organization is worth their salt, they will be doing emotional intelligence tests. And when you're dealing with a leader that has low emotional intelligence and the ability to read people and to understand people, have a deep appreciation for the different types of people in the
Right,
world and their value in the workplace. And you're right. And it's not gender specific either. It can be anybody.
right.
And a lot of people are afraid to show any vulnerability at all
Hmm.
because it's like dog eat dog. I'm a lawyer. I've seen it a million times. Lawyers are probably the worst for it. Especially I deal with like industrial law. So we're dealing with worst of the worst in terms of the loudest, the biggest eye rolls. Oh, I sit in those. Oh my God. And the behavior, I'm even keeled. I say, look, you know what? If this is where we're going today, we're not going to get anywhere.
Hmm.
So if we're going to have a reasonable conversation, let's have it. If not, I do industrial relations very differently than most people. When I first started, my leader that taught me how to do enterprise agreement bargaining, I walked into the meeting and there was probably four union leaders and there was my boss and me and I think another person. And it was insane. They were just throwing insults at each other
Oh my
and
gosh.
oh my God. And I thought to myself, is this the last area of business that has any decorum at all? Like I was horrified. And I remember ringing my husband saying, I can't do this job. I don't know how I'm going to do this job. I can't do it. Because I was taking it personally as well. I
Right.
was taking their behavior personally and trying to fix it. You can't fix someone else's behavior. You can only fix the way you feel about it. I've had probably the most difficult managers you've ever had. And the only way I could get through it was to understand why this behavior, and sometimes it's obvious why the behavior is annoying you, but find your voice in the process and be able to say, look, I really didn't like that interaction before. If possible, can we avoid that? How can we avoid that? Because if I've missed the mark, I get it. I had this manager that used to just go into this dark place and it was like everything was a disaster. And oh my God, it was. And I remember it's when I first started law actually. And because I did law in my 40s, I thought no one's going to get me off track. Of 10 years of study, I'm not doing this. Not letting anybody get me off track. Anyway, but it was a struggle. I was the first person that had lasted in that job more than 4 years.
Wow.
He'd had seven people through that job, and they'd lasted no more than a year, pretty much. And I remember thinking, and every time I'd hire someone, a third person in the team, they'd leave because I couldn't handle it. In the end, I used to run interference between them. I see them going down to their office. I'd say, hey, stop. Can you have a chat to me? What's going on? I need to know. Blah, blah, blah. And it was quite funny, but it wasn't easy. But
Right.
I had to handle the way that I dealt with it and the way that I felt about it. And look, there was still a lot of fear and there was still a lot of stuff going on for me in terms of my confidence and that kind of thing. And I didn't say I fake it till you make it, but there's an element of that until there's a really true, authentic confidence that you're able to deal with any difficult person as best as possible. And if they are so difficult that you can't deal with them, then say, look, I'm going to park this and we're going to, because you don't want to get into a massive row with someone screaming at you, because that's a choice too. It's a choice. Yeah.
So, how do you deal with a situation like that? I think that's a great example where it doesn't seem like there's a lot of trust or psychological safety because you are working for somebody who is so difficult. But a lot of people, especially newer leaders, won't have that confidence to really speak up. And then you'll see what you mentioned before. They'll just leave because they're not going to deal with it. How do they thrive in a situation like that or help build trust and psychological safety so they can have those open conversations?
See, the thing that I think that most people, I know I was dealing with at the time, was when I would react to this person's behavior, it was like he got what he wanted. So I'll give you an example. We would have to deliver some really complex areas of industrial laws under our wages, for example, and we would have to go through all these tables, 4 different awards, very complex award system we have for wages. And we would have to make these things, make these pay rates up for our members and send them out. And they're spreadsheets. And spreadsheets are not my thing, right? They're not. Thank God for Chat GPT now. I could just put a
Yeah.
spreadsheet, it fixes it for me. It's fine. It's one of those things. And as we were going through this, I remember what he would do. And when he first started doing it, I was, oh my God, and going, oh, I've got to fix that. And he'd be sitting there and watching me and almost smiling because I'd jumped
Ah,
down the hole. I'd gone down the
right.
hole.
You're giving them that
And
satisfaction.
absolutely. And then I realized when he did it to my other colleague and I was sitting beside him, she started to present this thing that he'd been asking to do, this project. And as soon as she started, had you thought of this? Have you thought of that? Have you looked up that? Have you? And she said, oh, I haven't added, no. And I remember I said, Jeff, can I just stop you for a moment? How about we let her present what she's done and then we'll have a conversation whether there's some gaps. I think she's worked on this enough. Let her show you her logical thought about how the way, and then let's jump in and use your expertise because we're looking for that, but not letting her speak and sending her down. Please, can we stop doing that right now? Oh, but I said, can we just now, just be awesome, but half an hour, let her do it. Anyway, and it happened. He let it happen. And then we had a reasonable conversation afterwards. But you can show people how to treat you. You
Mm,
can be confident enough to, and look, if they then say, oh, this is ridiculous, blah, blah, and storm out, that's not reasonable either.
right.
And that's their choice. Okay. But you're not being disrespectful. And I know people will be listening to this going, tried all of that. This person's too difficult. I'm only giving you an example. And everybody who's ever dealt with a very difficult person, they use what I call everything in your toolbox. You wake up every morning, you have the pit in your stomach, you've got to go and pass them in the hall, you've got to have a meeting with them at 10 o'clock, you've got to have all of that kind of stuff. And it's a spiral. You get into this spiral, I think, with people, and you just don't know how to get out. But it's you that needs to stop and look at the way you're reacting and find out why it's triggering you. And you can only change the way you feel about something. You cannot change the other person, but you can do it through your calmness. I do a lot of meditation and breath work. I have done a lot of positive affirmation stuff. I've done all of the things, all of the stuff. I do a lot of work on myself. And that's where it starts, because I think what a lot of people are doing, and this is also not gender specific, is people pleasing. We want to be liked. We want to be good at our jobs. We are trying to get that positive affirmation from somebody else, but it's got to start with you.
Yep.
You've got to be the one who's okay with what you're doing. If you know you're doing everything within your skill set, that you can do the job, and if there's still areas of development that you need, then speak up and
Yep.
say, I need this. I need this. If you don't say it, then that's your problem. You've left it to the gods and it may never happen.
Yeah.
So that's the only way I've been able to navigate it. And I know I've done communication training, and people have said, oh, that's bullshit. You can't deal with everybody. There's no way you can deal with every difficult person in the world. I said, you do or you don't.
Right.
They're still going to be there. They're everywhere. They're in your family, they're in your workplace, they're in your friend groups,
There's
they're
no
in
escape.
there's no escaping them. So you might as well deal with them.
Oh, that's so true. Oh,
Funny.
that's great. Karen, I have appreciated everything that you've shared. I think this is such an important topic that everybody needs to hear, and just your approach on how to deal with a lot of the people that we run into on a daily basis. Like you said, there is
Thank
no
you.
escape. I've definitely learned and internalized a lot from you. So I do appreciate it. And I want to reinforce to everybody, please, any questions or anything that you want to learn more, please contact Karen. I'll have all of Karen's information on the YouTube page and my postings and on Apple and Spotify and all the podcast platforms where you can subscribe to any of those places for this episode and more. You can subscribe to my Instagram at Leading Quarters, the YouTube page at Leading Quarters, and email me with any questions or ideas you might have for future episodes at leadingquarters@gmail.com. And then also, if you have any issues in getting a hold of Karen, just shoot me an email and I'll make sure I can help connect you all. But Karen Ansen, thank you so much for everything. I really appreciate your perspective and how serious but fun this conversation was, because building trust is a very serious, important thing. But I loved your examples and your approach with all of this as well.
Yeah, thank you.